On today's show, we discuss how Jaylon Tyson can fit in with the Cavs as a rookie. Is he in the rotation? Is he not? I've got Tony Pesta with me as we discuss on Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to leave a 5-star review, write some nice words in the comments as well. Also, make sure you're checking out Locked On Cavs on YouTube. Search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. Find this video, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and of course, click that notification bell so you know when the latest stuff from Locked On Cavs is going up. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And of course, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. I'm Danny Cunningham, everybody. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers at places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, or a number of other stops along the way. Brought in a very special guest today. I've got Tony Pesta with me, covers the Cavaliers for Fear the Sword, and of course, hosts the Junkyard Pod. You probably know him from Twitter too, at Tony_Pesta is where you can find him. And I wanted to talk with him about Jaylon Tyson because I know a lot of you were locked into Summer League. I don't know how many people were more locked into Summer League than Tony was. So I thought that he was really a great choice to come in here and talk about what Tyson did this summer. He played in all 5 games for the Cavs. I thought he got more comfortable. I thought he got better as the week went on. And Tony, that Lakers game really is the thing that stood out to me because he went up against Dalton Knecht, who's another guy that is a little bit on the older side as a first-round pick, someone that is expected to contribute early on. And I thought Tyson was the best player on the floor. And it got me to thinking, what exactly is his role going to look like as a rookie? How does he fit into the rotation? And I just think that there are a number of interesting ways that this could go. And one of them could be maybe at a certain point, maybe it's not right away, but maybe he's a guy that's leading the second unit or doing something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And first off, just wanted to say, Danny, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this platform and talk some Summer League basketball. Now, it is Summer League, so I want to start there and just say that, you never want to get too carried away. But to me, Tyson looks NBA ready. He looks like he could be the type of multifaceted wing that everyone has been hoping for on the Cavs. In that Lakers game, really the last 2 games of Summer League, he looked like the best player on the floor, which, again, you don't want to get carried away, but it's certainly encouraging. I thought offensively he saw the floor really well. To me, it looks like he was processing the game at a level that was at least above the Summer League competition. We'll have to wait and see how that translates to the NBA level. There could be a little bit of a learning curve for him. It's important to remember he was the 20th pick in the draft, but he's got a good handle, a strong frame. He plays with a deliberate pace that stood out to me, and he scored very efficiently throughout Summer League. And when you look at the defensive end, he's very active on the glass. I've seen Cavs Twitter throughout the Josh Hart comparison for him. Similar frame. He seems to just have an eye for tracking down missed shots. And so overall, on that side of the floor, he looked like he could be a solid team defender. And when you put all that together, you get a really exciting prospect. I see him, if it's not his rookie season, if we're just projecting, a good outcome for him, I think he could be a natural glue guy and a connective piece for this team. Again, maybe it doesn't happen right away, and you never want to get too carried away, so this isn't definitive, but I see a clear path for Tyson being very impactful for the Cavs moving forward.
Yeah, I do too. And you brought up Josh Hart, and I think that's a smart thing to bring up. And I know we're not the first show to talk about that comparison. We certainly won't be the last show to talk about that comparison. But if he can be a taller Josh Hart, that's such a win. And the rebounding is really the thing that I think first is easily connected because, you will go look at a random New York Knicks game and see a Josh Hart stat line. And he has somehow 15 rebounds despite being, I think 6'4" is probably a little generous height-wise for him. Jaylon Tyson's certainly a little bit bigger, but he rebounds the heck out of the basketball. And Tyson, I think, has shown that early on in the Summer League. And that is the thing that I'm probably the least worried about translating over. Like some of the playmaking stuff, I think he's really good at. And Summer League is, I think it's fair to say, faster. It's just like the game moves quicker than a Pac-12 game, rest in peace to the Pac-12, but then a Pac-12 game would. And then the NBA is at an entirely different level than even Summer League. So I think it's TBD how that's going to translate, but I do think he sees the court really well. And I thought it was really, really clear how comfortable he was with the basketball in his hands. So what I'm most curious about, and I'm very curious how you feel about this, but how long does it take for him to adjust to playing off the basketball? Because you look at how this Cavs roster is built up, and even if this is more of a 2025, 2026 thing instead of a 2024 thing, the Cavs roster is going to look somewhat similar. Like, we know Donovan Mitchell is going to be here. I think that there's reason to believe Darius Garland will be here. I don't know that there are many instances where Jaylon Tyson is going to be able to stand back and say, the ball's in my hands, I get to kind of control things. But that's where, to me, he looks the most comfortable.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It's the first couple games of Summer League, he was very quiet. I thought he played fine, but he didn't really do anything super impressive. And it's because he was playing in that off-ball role. Once he was on the ball, he looked a lot better. But again, his role with the Cavs, like it's not going to be Jaylon Tyson time anytime soon. I don't think he's going to get the opportunity to just go ISO and cook unless everyone else is injured and it's just a meaningless regular season game. So for me, that's what we have to wait and see. We have to find out, is he going to be able to play off ball? And probably my biggest concern for him is the 3-point shooting. Now, I think he has good touch. That's not really my worry. It's just, even in Summer League, he was a little hesitant to shoot. He didn't seem like he didn't take many catch and shoot 3-pointers. I'm not sure if he was comfortable taking them. He didn't do that a lot in college. So that's what you're going to have to do. If you're going to be a wing on the Cavs, you're going to have to catch and shoot. So that's my biggest concern. But other than that, just the natural feel for the game is what encourages me the most. He looks like a player he understands his role, and I think he'll buy into it. Not to segue or get off topic, but it's where my concerns with Emoni Bates come in, is that if he could simplify his shot diet and be more of an off-ball catch-and-shoot wing, he would be in the Cavs rotation tomorrow. It's just he hasn't really carved out that part of his game yet, and I think Tyson is much more polished in that regard. Again, it could take some time. There's probably going to be a learning curve for him. He was a very high-usage player in college. Coming to the NBA, not only is he making the jump to the NBA, but he's also playing in a very different role now. So we're going to have to be patient, but I do think he has the feel for the game. And again, like I said, I think there's just a clear path for him to being an impactful player, even if it takes a little bit of time.
So just to be clear here, you don't anticipate tweeting out, it's Jaylon Tyson time, -Jaylon Tyson.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I might end up pushing the agenda. Sometimes you got to abandon your morals when it comes to Twitter.
That is one of my favorite tweets to always go out, typically with Karis LeVert. I'm surprised we didn't see more of that with Emoni Bates during the Summer League, because it always does feel like it's Emoni Bates time when Emoni Bates is on the floor. But the off-ball, the catch-and-shoot stuff, I think is going to be... I don't know if it's going to be what determines how good he is. I think that some of that shot selection stuff and just kind of how often that jumper goes in is going to help to determine what his ceiling as a basketball player is. But the way I look at him, at least early on, and maybe I'm a little more optimistic because I went to Vegas and I saw it in person, but I think the most likely outcome for him is he is a good NBA player. And the difference between him being a good NBA player and a really good NBA player, I don't think great is in really the range of outcomes with him. But I think the difference between being good and really good is how often that shot goes in. Is he going to be a 37% three-point shooter? I'd feel really good about him. Is he going to be a 33% three-point shooter? Yeah, he still does enough other things to stay on the floor, but I think that ultimately is going to be the thing that determines just how good he is.
Yeah, and I would say the exact same thing. The three-point shot is what would bring all the skills that he has. That three-point shot is like the connective piece, because if he's able to space the floor, then he's drawing closeouts. He's able to attack that, create advantages with his dribble, get to the rim. One thing that I want to mention too is that his finishing in Summer League was super encouraging, especially some of the offhand stuff. I thought he did a great job using his body and getting to the rim. So again, if you're able to pull out defenders and get them to close out to you, it opens the rest of your game. And with this Cavs team, he is going to be playing an off-ball role. And if you can knock down three-pointers at a 37% clip at 6'7", that's something they don't have very many of on the roster. So it would be a welcomed addition.
Well, they just don't have very many guys that are 6'7" on the roster.
Yeah.
I think that alone makes him a very welcome addition. The last thing that I want to say on Tyson And you made the point about him being more on ball the last few games. Craig Porter Jr. didn't play the last couple of games. And, overall, I don't think he had the most impressive summer. I wonder how much that ankle is still bothering him after what was a pretty nasty ankle injury that he suffered the last regular season game for the Cavs. But I also wonder how much just being comfortable playing on that floor changed. Like, in watching the first game against the Magic 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks ago at this point, I thought that he looked like a guy that you could tell was maybe a little bit nervous that it was setting in on him that he was playing in the NBA for the first time. So I do think that's something that is to think about, whether or not it was he just happened to get more comfortable by being in a more familiar role, or if he was getting more comfortable because he had been getting more and more reps just playing basketball at a quasi NBA level. So I think that is something that we don't have an answer to. There's no way to have an answer to that, but that is something that it could be the case. It's just something that is worth thinking about.
Definitely. And like I said, we're going to have to see how any of this translates to the NBA. In that first summer league game, there was a play where he was dribbling the ball up the floor. I think it was first quarter, like the first time he really had an opportunity to bring the ball up, and he got picked at half court and turned it over. So as the summer league went on, he definitely looked more comfortable in that handle, and he's going to have to do it all over again in the NBA because it's going to be a whole nother learning experience for him. So I do think that, again, I've said it like a billion times already, but you don't want to exaggerate from summer league. But if you're going to be a player who actually is impactful in your rookie season, you should be able to dominate summer league to a degree. And that's what he did towards the end of summer league. So it was very encouraging for me. And it left me feeling like he could be a legit rotational piece by the end of his rookie season.
Yeah, I think that is something it's very possible. Obviously, time will tell. We don't know what Kenny Atkinson, new head coach of the Cavs, is going to do with that rotation. The bigger question I have with Atkinson is what's he going to do about Evan Mobley? Tony and I are going to discuss that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. And of course, that makes getting tickets to MLB games so much faster and so much easier. One of the best parts about Game Time is that prices actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. Maybe you want to go check out the Cleveland Guardians, who truthfully haven't been playing the best baseball as of late, but maybe you want to go cheer them on, try and help them right this rough patch of the season as they look to gear up for a playoff run. Game Time is the place to go if you want to find yourself inside Progressive Field at any point between now and the end of the season. They've got killer last minute deals. They show you the all-in price too, which I think is really important. I don't want to be bombarded with last minute fees and taxes. I want to know what I'm going to pay as soon as I see my seats, and Game Time tells me all that. Plus, they show you what your view from your seat that you're about to purchase is going to be. That's a really nice feature that Game Time has. I did go to a Cleveland Guardians game a few weeks back. I've told you guys about that. When I was in Vegas, I almost pulled the trigger on tickets to go to an Aces game. I used Game Time, but ultimately it was the day I flew in there. I was dead tired. I wasn't going to be able to enjoy that game as much as I would have, but I used Game Time. I found a great seat, and I just said, you know what? I'm a little too tired. I think going to bed probably the best option for me. But Game Time, they help you take the guesswork out of buying tickets to any baseball event or anything else. So what I want you to do, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So it's been a very long offseason, as we know. The Cavs have done, I think to this point, they've done 4 big things, maybe 4.5 big things, because the coaching search can really be separated into 2 if you really want to. But the first of those things, Tony, was hiring Kenny Atkinson to be the new head coach, replacing JB Bickerstaff, something that I'm encouraged by. And with the news of Evan Mobley coming out this week that he's signing a 5-year max extension that will be somewhere between 25 and 30% of the cap moving forward, it got me to thinking, well, the Cavs need to get more out of him, particularly offensively. So I have thought of a number of different ways that the Cavs can improve Mobley's game offensively under Atkinson. I'm curious for your thoughts on them, but the thing that sticks out to me right away, and this is, of course, under the under the thought that they're going to keep the core four together, that Jarrett Allen is not going anywhere, that it's going to be those four guys, and they're going to be playing two bigs again, at least for the time being. The first thing that I keep coming back to is just improving the pace. They've played so slow under JB Bickerstaff. I think Atkinson's going to want to play faster, and I think, Tony, that's really a way to get more out of Evan Mobley.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. I think one of the main criticisms of JB because I think JB is a fine coach. It's just he was never really known for his offense, and the pace, the way the Cavs played for the last 3 years was something that I myself was annoyed by. I know a lot of fans were frustrated. I believe they were bottom 3, bottom 5 in pace the last 3 years. And when you have players like Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and then two athletic rim running bigs in Mobley and Allen, it kind of doesn't make sense to play as slow as they did, especially because that half-court offense wasn't anything to write home about. So you would hope that Kenny Atkinson, given his background with the Warriors and the way that he coached in Brooklyn, they are going to ramp up the pace. And if you do that, you get more possessions to share between Mobley, Garland, and Mitchell. And you also get more opportunities for Mobley to do what he does best, which is he's 7 feet tall and he moves like nobody else. I mean, he's a unicorn. I know he doesn't get as much credit as like Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama now because they're just off this planet, but Mobley is still very unique in his mobility and agility for his size. And so rather than whenever under JB, it felt like, okay, it's time to get Mobley a touch. Let's throw the ball to him in the post. That's not his strength. He's not really a post player. You want him facing up on the elbow. It's something that the Cavs were kind of forced into doing against Boston in the second round. And Mobley looked great because he can take slower defenders off the dribble. He has really, really good touch around the rim. And so I hope that in this faster paced offense and really just getting more people involved playing, I think Atkinson will emphasize player involvement, less of this just pick and roll with the two guards over and over again. I think Atkinson's going to want to get Mobley active as a playmaking hub because that's another aspect of his game that I think has been really untapped under JB. I think Mobley has good court vision and feel for the game, so I want to see him handle the ball a little more. I want to see him catch above the break and see what he can do. And the last thing there is that I know other people have already drawn this comparison, but in Atkinson's tenure, he has helped develop Brook Lopez into a three-point shooter as well as Al Horford. And so with Evan Mobley, people have been saying it since he was drafted. If he can expand his range and start knocking down three-point shots, and I think we saw subtle improvements last year. It's still very, very low volume, but he started to shoot better towards the end of the year. If he can actually become a three-point threat, again, it just unlocks everything for him. So I'm really excited to see what Atkinson can do. And I think if you sign Evan Mobley to a max extension, you got to treat him like a max player. So better or worse, I just hope that Mobley gets the touches and the opportunities to sink or swim.
Yeah, I think that on this contract, then of course this deal doesn't actually kick in until next season, like this upcoming season. He's still technically an $11 million a year player, even though he signed the max. That doesn't kick in for another year. The thing that I think makes the most sense, and what I've noticed about him offensively, and you're right about just throwing him the ball into the block is not who he is. He's not a post player. That's not how you're going to get the best out of him. I think what Atkinson and this coaching staff need to do is they need to figure out as many ways as possible where they can get the ball in Evan Mobley's hands while he's already moving. I think that is one of the things that to me stands out. He's so much more efficient offensively if he's getting the pass while he's already got a step or two moving forward, where he's not starting from a standstill. Yeah, he can face up guys and still be effective there, but I think he's more effective when he can get sort of a head start on going downhill. And the three-point stuff, I need to see him take more of those. I would be stunned if that's not the case this year. Like, Kenny Atkinson made Jarrett Allen shoot threes in Brooklyn. It wasn't a ton of threes, but he was taking more than half a three a game under Atkinson there. So that is something that I would be stunned if Evan's not shooting at least 3.5, if not 4 threes a game. And what that percentage looks like will be a very interesting thing to track as he gets to a higher volume. But I think that is certainly another way. But for me, the biggest thing is getting him the ball while he's moving. If he's doing that, he's so much better. And I think if he's moving and not giving defenses the opportunity to really tighten down because of the lack of space, I think that's one of the ways to make it work if you do want to play two, I guess, quote unquote, non-shooting bigs together.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, so much of Mobley's career so far has been spent either sitting in the dunker spot or setting these screen and rolls over and over again. And if you can find more creative ways to get him the ball while he's cutting or just flashing to the middle rather than, again, being stationary at the dunker spot, or even some of the attempts where they try and space him out in the corner, that's something that was true for many Cavs role players. It seemed like every play there's just someone standing in the corner. There's no off-ball movement. There's one action happening. I hope that Atkinson will bring more of a freelance offense where Mobley is in motion, because if he catches with an advantage, he's 7'1". He's a great finisher. He has a really good feel for using his body in creative ways. I think if you get him at the ball in motion with an advantage, it's just an easy way to increase his usage and get easy points on the board.
One of the other things I'm curious, and this is less about Atkinson and more about just Evan. I'm curious how much heavier he comes into this season. Like, how much muscle will he have added by time training camp rolls around in early October? What does he look like physically? Because I've always thought, he doesn't need to put on a ton of weight, but he needs to put on some. He needs to put on some muscle. He needs to get stronger. And I think that what he looks like, and, think back, I mean, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago at this point, but there was an offseason where Giannis went from being a guy that looks like how Evan Mobley does now to looking like Giannis. And I'm not expecting Evan to have that sort of transformation with his body, but I think if he could do, 70 to 75% of that type of transformation, I'd feel much better about him as an offensive player, just because even if the shot isn't great, isn't falling at the clip we'd all like it to, if he's that much stronger while retaining the athleticism that he has, he'd be in such a great spot.
Yeah, and I think, maybe a more realistic comparison would be like Anthony Davis and the way that he was able to add muscle throughout his career and just get to the point where I know right now the Cavs are currently constructed under this two big lineup, but even if Allen is on the roster, there's still going to be times where Mobley is playing center. And up to this point, he just doesn't have the size to consistently hold down that position throughout when he's playing against some of the other bigger players in the NBA. So if he can add some muscle, and even just speaking to his offense, like probably the weakest aspect of his offense is when he's getting overpowered by a stronger player. That's when you see him, some of these awkward misses. He'll resort to that awkward fadeaway. If he was able to take more contact, and I think we saw a little bit of that last year. It wasn't where you wanted yet, but it was definitely improvement from his rookie season. He was able to take some contact down low. It's just he's still outmatched against some of the bigger players in the NBA. And so if you want him to get to that point, I agree with you. You're going to hope that he adds a little bit more weight this year and just continues to add weight throughout his career, because he's still only, I believe, 23. So
right
by the time he's 25, 26, that's where the Anthony Davis comparison would come into play, where hopefully he has started to make improvements each year and get to a point where you can be a full-time center if that's the ultimate outcome for this Cavs team, which I know a lot of people think it is.
I've got one more question for you about Evan Mobley, and I know you've got a hot take about this Cavs offseason that I've made you come up with, and we're going to hear. I want to ask you that question about Mobley right after this here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify. Search us on YouTube. If you're still watching this video and you haven't hit that thumbs up button, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit that notification bell as well. Tony, with Evan Mobley, I know that I don't like to have these sessions as like I'm interviewing you or going through that. Like, I want this to be conversational, but I'm just going to ask you a point blank question. Do you think that the Cavs can get the most out of Mobley without him being a full-time center?
That's the golden question. And it's
tough
because it's tough because clearing out the center position and throwing Mobley into the fire seems to be the most straightforward, obvious way to do it. But I do think, I subscribe to this belief that if Mobley is that guy, he's going to become that guy regardless. There's, even with Allen on the team, he splits half of his minutes playing center while Allen's on the bench. So the opportunities are there. Mobley kind of just needs to do it, right? Like, if you think of, even, this is kind of a wild example, it's just off the top of my head, but when it was Jokic and Nurkic in Denver, at a certain point, Jokic was just like, hey, I'm the full-time center. I'm the guy. And he bumped Nurkic out of the lineup and eventually off the Nuggets altogether. I'm not saying Evan Mobley is going to be Jokic. I'm just saying if Evan Mobley is the full-time center, he will eventually get to the point where it's just undeniable. some people might argue maybe we saw that in the Boston series where it was like, okay, all of a sudden this guy looks like a legit offensive weapon now that he's at center. It's going to be an ongoing debate for Cavs fans. I've kind of been a coward and haven't planted my flag on either side because I'm kind of cheating and saying I think one way or another we're going to find out who Evan Mobley is, and I think he can become that player even if Allen is here because, again, he's splitting his minutes basically half and half with and without Allen. So the easy way to do it is trading Allen, but it looks like the Cavs are very committed to this core four, and I still do believe Evan Mobley can reach his ceiling next to Allen.
I think that'll be one of the most fascinating things to find out. I certainly think that he needs to be a full-time center to get the most out of his career. I don't know if we're there yet. I think that we're getting closer every day though. That is certainly, that's where I fall on that. So I won't be a coward. I will throw out a take there. Overall, Tony, what have you thought of this offseason? What's your hottest take about the Cavs right now? Just what have you thought so far since the Cavs have last played real basketball?
Well, I do share some of the frustration and the impatience when it comes to not really supporting or not really improving the supporting cast. I would have liked to see the supporting cast shuffled at this point. As I've kind of already said, I'm not really big on having to split up the core four. I think you could convince me to do it if the correct deal was out there, but Brandon Ingram didn't exactly move me. So I'm okay with them being patient in that regard. It's the supporting cast that I would like to see some more stuff happen there, but I know the Okoro situation is kind of what's the holdup for that whole thing. But for my hot take, and I don't know if this is what you were aiming for, but I'll just let it go anyways. I think Darius Garland's going to have the bounce back season. I think he'll be an all-star. I think under Kenny Atkinson playing a more freelance offense, Darius Garland's going to return to the Darius Garland we know and love. I could easily see him being a 22-8 guy again, shooting very efficiently across the board. I think he's better on defense than he ever gets credit for. He's not an elite defender by any means, but I think he can hold his own. And listen, he's played heavy minutes for the best defensive team, one of the top 3 defensive teams over and over again. So clearly the guy can do something on that end. But overall, I just think Darius is going to have a bounce back year. I think last season was just such a perfect storm of injury, personal issues off the court, and just every single time it felt like he was gaining momentum. He got hit in the face. He broke his jaw. He suffered a hamstring injury. His three-point shot just disappeared, which happens throughout the course of a regular season for anybody. You're going to have cold stretches. It just happened that his cold stretch occurred at the worst possible time after the All-Star break there, especially getting to the rim. And again, I know people have mentioned this over and over again, but when you break your jaw and you lose 15 pounds, it gets harder to get to the rim at the NBA level. So I just think this summer it's going to be really huge for DG, just kind of hitting the reset, gaining that weight back, cleaning out all the adversity that he went through last year. And I think he's going to bounce back and have a much, much better year.
I could not agree with you more on that. Garland had such a nightmare of a season. Like, you talk about the personal stuff, you talk about the jaw issue. I believe there was a wrist issue in there, or a thumb issue at some point too. And fracturing your jaw, and you mentioned just like the physical aspect of being able to get to the rim when you're 15 pounds lighter and how difficult it is because of the strength you lose when you can really only drink smoothies through a straw for 4 weeks. And part of the reason why, I think it's kind of unfair to be critical of him for that. If I had my jaw fractured and I got hit in the face as many times as Darius Garland gets hit in the face, it's uncanny. You know what I probably wouldn't want to do all that often is go to the basket. I probably wouldn't be as aggressive, whether I'm meaning to be a little bit less aggressive or not. That probably just would be what takes over me because I don't want to get hit in the face again. So I can't blame him for that. That's the one thing that, I've seen people be critical of it, and I get it because that is something that was missing from his game. But far be it for me to say, oh yeah, it's easy, just recover from a broken face and keep going back to the basket where these 7-foot behemoths waiting to block your shot and probably hit you in the face again, because that's all that seems to happen with him.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too. I've shared this stat a bunch, and off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly where Garland ranked, but over the last 2 years, he was slowly but surely improving at getting to the rim and to the free throw line. I think we were seeing the year before it was a career high. The first half of this year, it was going to be another career high. He went from slightly above average in the paint to, after the jaw injury, I think he was literally the second worst in the NBA after with a certain volume getting to the rim. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, it tracks. Like you said, if you break your jaw and you're already an undersized guard, it's got to mess with you mentally getting to the rim. And so I think that will be one of the biggest areas where we see just kind of a return to form. I don't think he'll ever be an elite finisher around the rim. He doesn't have that Kyrie Irving level touch, but he was getting to a point where he was slightly above average. And when you combine the fact that over the last handful of years, he has been an elite, efficient three-point shooter, one of the best floor generals in the NBA, I think Kenny Atkinson will help figure out a better balance between Mitchell and Garland. That's something that, again, people had issues with under JB, is that kind of felt like it was your turn, my turn. I'm hoping Atkinson will find a better way to mesh those two together and let Garland return to the floor general that he once was, because he is still one of the best playmakers in the NBA. And my hot take is he's going to return to that and shut everybody up the way that Jared Allen did last year.
Yeah, I think that is, I think that's smart. And I believe it was you. I'm not positive if it was, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was you that had the stat of how many and ones Darius Garland had before and after his jaw injury. Like, that to me was the most telling stat you could find, because it wasn't just that the finishing went down, but the opportunities went down too. And I thought that stat really told the whole story. That was you, right?
Yeah. I don't remember what the exact number was, but I know it dropped off significantly.
Yeah, I thought that told the whole story. I'm with you. I think the time to buy stock in Darius Garland is now. I don't know that I'm all the way there that he's going to be an all-star, because I think there are a lot of good guards in the Eastern Conference, and I think it's really difficult to have two all-stars at the same position on the same team. And I don't see a world where if Donovan Mitchell is healthy, he's not an all-star, because he's that good. So I'm not sure that I get all the way there, but I think the rest of it's spot on. That's a good take. Thank you for bringing that one today, Tony.
Thank you. Also, for the record, I was just here to bring a hot take. Maybe he doesn't make the all-star team either. I just throwing it out there.
You can find Tony on Twitter at Tony_Pesta. He writes at Fear the Sword. Also, check out his pod, The Junkyard Pod. Tony, thank you so much for doing this. Again, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast. Search Locked On Cavs, Apple, Spotify. Give us a 5-star review. Find us on YouTube as well. Search Locked On Cavs. Make sure you like this video. Hit that subscribe button. Click the notification bell as well. And thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day.